Welcome to the That's My Dad program. We're here today with Mike Wilcut. Thank you for being here, Mike.
Thank you for
You're probably wondering why did you get invited? Have you asked yourself that question?
I do. I wondered, what did I do?
Mike and I have been friends for a number of years, 25, 30, I think.
About 30, yeah.
Yeah, so most of the people we have as guests here, we select them because we've seen the fruit of their labor. And I know your children very well.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know when you meet a person that says a lot about who raised them, and I know them, and I know that you're a special guy because I know who your kids are. So that's why you're here.
Oh, okay.
So we're going to try to learn a little bit from you. We're going to pick your brain a little bit. We're really trying to reach young guys who maybe didn't have a great father growing up, and to try to help them learn what that means to be a father. What do you have to do? So, Mike, you and I have never talked about your relationship with your dad or about your dad at all. Yeah. So I think that's a good place to start.
Okay. It's interesting to think about that. And I've been thinking, what would I say, and sharing about my dad and everything. And it's an interesting story. Because I grew up, I was born in 48, and when you live through the 50s and 60s, and times weren't all that good for a lot of people. And my dad was just a hard-working man. And my mom and dad got married very young. And in that day, it wasn't that unusual. Mm-hmm. But we kind of my brother and I raised our parents. Because I think my dad was 17 when I was born.
Okay.
And my brother's 2 years older than me. And
he got started early.
They got off to an early start, and you can imagine how it was. And it was a rocky road for my mom and dad. And I didn't realize it till, I don't know, somebody said something some time ago. And I never lived in a home that we owned all the time I lived at home. We lived in rental homes all the time. Now, my mom and dad eventually bought a house, and they enjoyed it for many years and everything, but I grew up in rental homes, and we moved a lot. My dad was in construction kind of work, and I've gone to school in Blue Mountain Elementary School, and Jacksonville Elementary School, back to Blue Mountain, then to Sachs, then to Southside, and then to Lincoln, and then back to Southside. So I shifted around in schools and stuff a lot. But my dad became a Christian man when I was pretty young. I remember it. But he didn't live it out. They, I don't know how things change and times get rough and you move and all those kind of things. Something happened. Anyway, he was a tough guy, and he believed in work. Matter of fact, he had a tag on the front of his truck that said, "I fight poverty, I work."
Wow! Wow!
That was his motto for life.
Can we get one of those? Did they print very many of those?
I don't know if they still got them or not, but I remember that tag, and I thought, brother, he believes in that. Because when I was young, we lived in Southside, and I'm saying young, I was 12 years old maybe. Our summer job, my brother and I we were on top of a rock pile. We were down on the Sewell place, and they were dredging sand to build Interstate 59. And that's the...
You're dating yourself, Mike.
Yeah. Yeah, there was no Interstate 59 there. But, and our job was to pick mud balls out of those rock piles.
And you were 12 years old.
I guess I might have been 12. I don't know. But it was young. I wasn't any older than 12. I might have been younger. But all day long, there's no shade tree on a rock pile. You're out in the sun all day. And that's what we did. And that's the kind of jobs he would find for us. But we made 50 cents an hour. Wow. Doing that.
Did you have to pay taxes out of that?
I did not pay tax out of that. But that was the kind of work he found for us. But I just kind of hung out with Daddy, and I watched him work on lawnmowers and things like that, and I learned a lot. And back when I was a kid living in Anniston, I was walking down the street one day, and we lived in kind of a community, and this guy couldn't crank his mower. And I was probably 8 years old, but he couldn't crank his lawnmower. So I said, "You having trouble with your mower?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Can I try it?" And I looked at it, and I did a couple of things to it, and I got it cranked for him. Wow. So he could cut his grass. And that man was amazed.
Because your dad had taught you how to do something.
He did.
Yeah, we talked about that previously, about me teaching my son how to do what we call man things.
Yeah.
So you hung out with him, sounds like, and it was just a matter of stuff rubbed off on you, it sounds like.
It did. He taught me how to do almost any kind of thing you'd need to do around your house. He wasn't a great woodworker, but he could put wood things together. I learned later how to do it better.
Yeah.
But he was a welder. He was a mechanic. He ran heavy equipment. And he came up in a hard time when the men that did what he did would not teach you how to work. Because there was a fear there that if they taught you how to operate a drag line or a piece of equipment, that you would get their job.
Oh, wow.
So that they weren't very helpful to teach you really what you need to know how to run something. But my dad had a lot of mechanical skills. His dad was actually a pretty famous guy in the steam engine day.
Your granddad.
My granddad, he was well known for knowing how to repair and make steam engines run like they should.
Really?
Yeah, he ran what we call an oil mill.
Yeah.
And that's a mill where they would bring cottonseed and crush it and get the oil out of it.
Yeah.
And it was powered by a steam engine. So he's pretty famous for that.
So did you get to know him, your granddad?
I didn't get to know him real well because by the time I come along, he'd already retired. Well, he was doing some jobs, but it wasn't nothing like he was normally did. But he died in his 60s. But alcohol had its issues in our home.
Really?
And with my granddad and my dad and his two brothers. And I could see it.
Yeah.
I could see the pattern of their lives. And because they were all so close to being the same. And they would get together from time to time. And I could see it in all three of them. And I thought, I don't want to go down that road.
Wow.
That's not good. My dad was a heavy smoker. My brother and I never smoked because we saw what it would do.
Right.
We hated it.
So you had to make a choice, and we talk about that a lot here. You had to make a conscious choice of saying, I'm not going to follow that path.
We did.
You're what we call a script flipper.
Okay.
You flipped the script on what your family was doing, and to me that's so important because the young men that I've spent my life working with, a lot of them have to be script flippers. They have to make a choice. And the thing that I'm finding, I'm hearing over and over as we do more and more of these interviews, is that guys like yourself just say, well, I'm just going to make a choice. I'm going to do better. I'm not going to do those things that I know are going to destroy me. So you say alcohol was an issue. Was it a debilitating thing in your family, or was it some people manage it differently than others?
Well, I don't think anyone ever had to go to a rehab with it, but I witnessed to both of my dad's brothers, and they were on up in years. And the Lord moved in their life, and they got saved, and they quit drinking.
Isn't that amazing how people quit drinking when they...
It is amazing. I have seen it several times when they didn't go through a 12-step program or anything.
Yeah.
God took them and delivered them.
Right.
I'm telling you, I know a man that was the town drunk. He didn't even have an automobile. He would walk every day where he went.
Yeah.
And he worked uptown, and he lived in Southside. But I witnessed to that man. And it was about 2 weeks later, I came out. I was in the choir at church. I came out, you know how we traditional Baptist church, everybody was seated, and then the choir comes out. Well, I was in the choir, and we came out, and I looked, and there in the balcony was that man.
Wow.
I like to fell out. He didn't drink after that.
So,
And he had drunk all his life. But God can do anything.
so that's a story that needs to be told, because we hear so much about it's a disease, you got to go through treatment. And I'm not against any of that. Don't get me wrong. But my granddad was a smoker. But both of my granddads were smokers. And you know what they did? They both quit cold turkey. In fact, my granddaddy decided that he was not going to tell my grandmother he had quit smoking, because she'd find something else to nag him about. So he just put the cigarettes down and didn't say anything to anybody. And then we all realized a couple of months later, well, he's quit. So you're telling me that this guy made a decision to drop a bad habit. How did alcohol affect your family, do you think?
It was not good. It was not good at all. I saw fights between my dad and his brother. I saw fights between my dad and my mom. And to this day, I can't forget those.
It's embedded in your memory.
It is. It's implanted there. And I mean, I remember when I was a little fella, I probably wasn't 5 years old. I can still remember seeing my uncle come flying through our bedroom one night where my dad had hit him.
Wow.
I'd already gone to bed, and they were drunk, and I don't know what was said or done. I just know I saw my uncle come flying through our bedroom, hit the wall. And I saw my dad, and he did some things I wished he hadn't done with my mom. And that hurts. But it did. And as I got older, he did the last thing he ever did, because I told him. I was a grown man then. Mom got to the phone, and she called me. And I came over. And I had to tell him, don't you ever, ever do this again. There'll be consequences. And I meant it. I meant it. And he didn't after that. But my dad got saved. At a young man, he wanted to be saved. His dad was rough. And his mom was rough. And therefore he became rough.
Wow.
He didn't know how to live. He didn't have a model. The men he worked with were horrible. I mean, I worked with him. As an adult, I worked with him. And I saw how they lived and how they talked and the habits they had. And his life was just a struggle. And I began to understand that. He hadn't had a model.
Right.
But when he became a Christian, he changed. And he loved my mom. My mom was a cancer patient. And after Daddy got his life together, you couldn't have asked for a better model than what he did for her. He cared for her. Oh, he cared for her. He loved her so much. And he loved being my brother. And he loved serving God. He and Gordon Miller would go every week. I don't know if they went every day or not, but it was every week. They visited people at homes and hospitals, and he kept a little pad in his pocket, in his pencil. And he'd break that pad out, and he could tell you how everybody in that church was doing.
Wow.
And he was praying for them. Now, my dad prayed. He had a workshop away from the house, and he didn't pray at the house. My dad would go to his workshop, and he had a little stool. I got it. I still got it.
Yeah.
And he would get down on that stool, and he would pray.
Wow.
Man, would he pray. And when I needed him so much, he was there for me.
Wow.
Because my life came apart when I was my mid-20s. I mean, I hit rock bottom. And I moved back home with my parents, and they received me. No problem. They knew what had happened, and they loved me, and they took care of me, and I got back on my feet. God sent me a wonderful wife,
Yeah.
and a family,
Yeah.
and that's a whole nother story in itself. But I was so blessed. But my dad took care of me. My mom did. They were there for me in thick and thin.
Did you find it difficult to forgive your dad for the rough times that you'd gone through? What was the process there?
I still think about it, but I've forgiven him, and he knows that. He knew that. My mom and dad are both passed now, but he knew. He trusted me. He trusted me more than anybody in the world. How
important do you think it was that you forgave him? And what do you think your life would have been like without offering him that forgiveness?
I think it would have destroyed me. Unforgiveness is worse than cancer. It will destroy you. It will absolutely crush you. And I couldn't live with unforgiveness. I had to forgive it. Now, forgetting it, we live in a body of flesh, and we got to deal with it. And it creeps back up.
Right.
But you just say, I've forgiven him for that. He's forgiven. I've forgiven him, and I can live with it that way.
And your dad, even with his faults, I think there's a message there to our listeners that, number one, you were willing to forgive him. You know, I'm thinking there might be a dad listening, and he says, I have really messed up. I've not been right to my kids. But your children, my experience has been that they're always willing to forgive if you're willing to ask for it and make a change.
I think you're right.
Yeah, so you forgave your dad even in spite of the fact that, you know, you've witnessed the fights and the results of alcoholism. You forgave him. And I think that's a message that needs to be out there for dads. The other part of your story that, you know, Micah, I didn't know this. This is the first time I've heard this, and I can see in your eyes that there's still some pain.
There is.
And I think that young men out there need to know that you can work through that pain, because here's what I know about you. It's nothing that you told me is what I would have expected. You're a reputable man in the community. You had a great job. You have great children. You have great grandchildren. They're not great grandchildren. They're great as an adjective. You've got what outsiders would look at Mike Wilcut and say, man, this guy's got it made. He probably never had a challenge. He must have came out of he's born with a silver spoon in his mouth. But that's not the truth. You had to make a choice to turn things around, to flip the script on your family. So what was it like? First of all, Mike and Carol, y'all weren't quite the Brady Bunch, but it was an instant family. You were in your 20s, I'm thinking, yeah. And so all of a sudden, you go from 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds. You go from being a single man living with your parents to being, within a year, being married with 4 kids. Tell me how you made the adjustment to do that.
Well, it's not easy. Number one is you make sure you're in church every week.
Is that so you can learn, or so you can maintain your sanity? So you can send the kids to the nursery, or what?
Yeah, well, that's part of it. But you have to maintain a spiritual closeness there that is just has to be there. You can't make it without it. Mm-hmm. And you have to learn. And one of the big decisions I had to make okay, I'm a father to the twins. I'm a stepdad to these other two children.
Mm-hmm.
But I told myself, Mike, you're going to love all four of these kids as though they're all yours.
Wow.
And don't you ever forget that. And I've told myself that, and I have tried my best to live that, because you can't have a home that's filled with love, and two of the children call you stepdad, and two of them, there can't be a divide there.
Well, I knew you for years before I ever knew that. I mean, it was never brought up at all, and I don't even know how I found that out. But yeah, they, Tammy and Barry, see you as you're all they know, and I think they have a healthy respect for their birth father as well. But yeah, you did a great job. So, is that the key to this? It was sort of a blended family. You think that's the key, just to make up your mind?
It is. It's a big key. We have to make up our mind that that love never fails. And when you really understand what that means, you can see it in action, and it never fails. It never fails. No.
So a couple things as we kind of wind down here. If you were able to sit down with your dad one more time and pour your heart out to him, what would you say to him?
Well, I'd tell him I love him. He knew that, but I'd tell him again. You can't tell him too much. I would tell him, thank you for teaching me the value of work. Because that's a principle that all people need to know. We need to know how to work. Mm-hmm. God give us abilities with our hands and eyes and ears and minds to work, to produce. We're not idle.
Right.
And I would thank him for teaching me that valuable lesson. And I would thank him for forgiving me for the times that I missed it and the mistakes that I made. And I'd forgive him for anything he ever did to me. That's all gone because I loved him, and I think he knew that.
So that's a message to the young guy who's out there struggling with the relationship he has with his dad. It can be fixed. It's never too late.
Forgiveness
Fix that.
is like a miracle.
Yeah. We have one little thing to do before we finish up. We sneaked and got one of your kids to share with us a little story about you, and we want to have you watch that and then share with us how you feel about it.
My dad is a good dad because he always set a godly example for his children. He led by example. He worked hard every day as a mechanical engineer and would come home and work hard for his family. During Christmas, we had our very own Santa's workshop in the basement and didn't realize it. Now that I'm grown and have children of my own, I really appreciate all my dad did for us. That's my dad.
Mike, what's it feel like to have your grown daughter remember something you did when she was a little girl?
That's pretty humbling, I tell you.
Yeah.
It really is. But, yeah, I did put in the time, but it was worth every second of it.
Yeah,
every second.
They remember those gifts. And she told me exactly what all you had built her.
Did she?
They remember that more than anything you could have bought at the store, because that was your way of showing them you loved them. To meet Mike Wilcut, you think this guy's got it all together. and you do, but it didn't come easy. And I think that's the takeaway from this is to the young man out there who's thinking, man, I'll never be like that guy. Well, this guy, he made some things happen, and God made some things. And I think his message, Mike's message is to you is that if you'll allow God to do some things in your life, if you're willing to forgive some people and you're willing to reconcile with some people, you can have a wonderful life, just like Mike has.
Amen.
Thanks for setting that example, Mike.
Thank you.
That'll conclude this episode of That's My Dad. Happy you were with us. Be back next week. we're changing the direction of fatherless children, giving them some hope, trying to give them a chance and encouragement and inspire them to flip that script, to do what Mike did, and to make it better for your children than it was for you. Thanks for being with us. See you next week.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. This has been the That's My Dad podcast with our host, Scott Hilton, where we're on a mission to break the cycle of generational fatherlessness and inspire fathers to become great dads. We'll be back here every Monday night at 6 p.m. We'll see you then.